Most people are waiting for something dramatic before they believe they are being guided. They expect a loud voice from the sky, a sudden miracle, or an unmistakable moment that leaves no room for doubt. But the truth is, guidance rarely arrives in that way. It is usually quiet. It is subtle. It comes in a form so ordinary that a distracted mind can easily dismiss it. You have felt it before, that quiet inner pull that doesn't shout but gently insists, a thought that returns again and again without invitation, a feeling that lingers longer than expected, almost as if it is trying to get your attention. Most people call it overthinking, or coincidence, or imagination. But what if it is none of those things? What if it is intelligence beyond your present understanding, speaking in the only language you are quiet enough to hear? Life does not always communicate through external events first. It begins within. The inner world is always speaking before the outer world confirms anything. And those who learn to pay attention to the subtle inner signals begin to notice something remarkable. Nothing in their experience is random anymore. Even the smallest impression carries meaning. Even a passing thought can become a direction. You may notice how certain ideas keep returning to you, not once, not twice, but repeatedly across different moments of your day. You try to ignore it, yet it returns again. That repetition is not meaningless, it is persistence, and persistence is never random. It is the nature of something that wants to be acknowledged. Or perhaps you notice how certain situations keep appearing in different forms. The same lesson disguised in different people. The same challenge showing up in different environments. It is as if life is holding up a mirror until you finally see what you were meant to understand. And when you finally pause long enough, you realize the message was always there, you were simply too busy to listen. The mistake most people make is assuming that guidance must be obvious to be real. But true guidance is designed for awareness, not for noise. It does not force itself upon you. It invites you. It whispers until you are willing to become still enough to hear it. And stillness is something most people avoid, because in stillness, truth begins to surface. Even your intuition operates in this way. It does not argue, it does not provide long explanations, it simply feels right or it does not. And when you ignore it, life eventually shows you why it mattered, not as punishment, but as correction, a gentle return to awareness. There is a deeper intelligence moving through you and around you, constantly aligning circumstances, thoughts and experiences. But it can only guide you to the degree that you are willing to notice. The signs are always present. The question is never whether they exist, but whether you are attentive enough to perceive them. And once you begin to respect these subtle signals, your entire experience of life changes. You stop living reactively and start living consciously. You stop chasing answers outside and start recognizing the quiet instructions already within you. Because nothing important is ever truly hidden from the one who has learned to pay attention. There is a point in every person's life where repetition becomes impossible to ignore. The same situation begins to appear again and again, wearing different faces but carrying the same message. At first you call it coincidence, you brush it off and move on. But life has a way of repeating itself until it is understood. What you fail to recognize the first time, it brings back a second time. What you ignore the second time, it returns again with greater intensity. Nothing is random in the pattern of your experience. Most people think life is chaotic, that events are disconnected and without meaning. But when you begin to observe closely, you realize something deeper is at work. Patterns are not accidents, they are language. And when something repeats in your life, it is not because life is confused, it is because you are being directed toward awareness. The repetition is not punishment. It is emphasis. It is life underlining what you have refused to read. Think about it carefully. A similar type of person enters your life again and again, and each time the outcome is the same. A familiar challenge arises in different circumstances, yet the emotional experience feels identical. You may change the environment, you may change the timing, but the core lesson remains untouched. This is not bad luck. This is instruction. The pattern is saying, look here, this is what you must understand. The human mind is quick to label things as coincidence because that explanation requires no responsibility. If it is random, you do not have to respond to it. But when you begin to accept that repetition carries meaning, something within you awakens. You realize that life is not just happening to you, it is communicating with you through what keeps happening. There is intelligence in repetition. It is how awareness is developed. Just as a teacher repeats a lesson until the student understands, life repeats its lessons until consciousness finally responds. And when the lesson is understood, the repetition stops. The pattern dissolves, not because life changed, but because you did. You may notice that certain thoughts also repeat within you. The same idea returns at different times of the day, sometimes when you are least expecting it. You try to move past it, but it comes back again. That inner repetition is just as significant as external events. It is as if something within you is knocking gently, waiting for acknowledgement. The mistake is not in experiencing patterns, but in dismissing them too quickly. When you overlook repetition, you remain in cycles. You meet the same lessons in different forms, not because you are unlucky, but because you have not yet responded to the message being shown. Once you begin to see repetition as communication, your awareness sharpens. You start to ask a different question. Instead of asking why this keeps happening to me, you begin to ask, what is this trying to show me? That shift alone changes everything, because now you are no longer a victim of circumstance, but a student of experience. And the moment you truly understand the message hidden in repetition, the cycle breaks, not through force, but through realization. What once kept returning finally loses its purpose because its lesson has been received. And when the lesson is received, life has no reason to repeat itself anymore. There are moments in life when something does not work out. No matter how much you desire it, no matter how much effort you put into it, and no matter how deeply you believe it should be yours. In that moment, the natural reaction is resistance. The mind begins to argue, to question, to insist that something has gone wrong. But what if nothing has gone wrong at all? What if what you are calling a setback is actually a form of protection you are not yet able to understand? Most people interpret closed doors as rejection. They believe that when an opportunity disappears, it is loss. But life operates with a deeper intelligence than immediate satisfaction. Not every desire is aligned with your greater path, and not every opportunity that looks right in the moment is right for your unfolding. A closed door is not always a denial of your worth. It is often a redirection of your energy. There are paths you once desperately wanted that, if you reflect honestly, you can now see would have led you into confusion, delay, or even pain. At the time, you could not see beyond your desire. You only saw what you wanted, not what it would cost you. And yet, something larger than your current awareness intervened. The door did not open, not because you were being stopped, but because you were being guided away from something misaligned. This is where trust becomes essential. Trust not in the immediate outcome, but in the intelligence behind the outcome. Life is not simply giving and taking randomly. It is arranging. It is positioning you. And sometimes positioning requires removal. What is not meant to continue in your life will eventually be withdrawn, no matter how tightly you hold on. There is a hidden mercy in rejection that is only understood later. At the moment of disappointment, you cannot see it. You feel only the absence of what you expected. But with time, clarity begins to form. You begin to notice how things unfolded in ways you did not anticipate, how certain paths naturally dissolved, how certain connections faded, how certain plans collapsed. And when you look back, you often realize that what you once called failure was actually alignment in disguise. A closed door forces you to redirect your attention. It removes you from what would have consumed your energy without purpose. It interrupts your attachment to outcomes that were not rooted in your highest direction. And in that interruption, something important happens. You begin to reconsider. You begin to pause. You begin to question what you truly need, not just what you wanted in the moment. Many breakthroughs in life are born from redirection, not acquisition. When one path closes, another becomes visible that you were too distracted to notice before. But this only happens when you stop forcing what is no longer opening. Resistance keeps you emotionally tied to something that has already ended. Acceptance, on the other hand, frees your awareness to see what is now available. A closed door is not the end of movement, it is the beginning of correction. It is life adjusting your course when you are drifting towards something that cannot sustain you. And although it may feel uncomfortable, discomfort is often the signal that a deeper realignment is taking place. If you can learn to interpret closed doors not as punishment but as protection, your entire experience changes. You stop grieving what did not unfold and start becoming aware of what is being prepared. And in that awareness, you begin to walk forward without confusion. knowing that what leaves your life was never meant to stay, and what is meant for you cannot be blocked. And in that realization, disappointment transforms into understanding, and understanding transforms into peace. There is a quiet form of intelligence within you that does not speak in words, yet it communicates more accurately than anything you could ever hear externally. It expresses itself as feeling, as inner movement, as a subtle sense of ease or resistance that rises within you before the mind has time to explain it away. Most people overlook this completely, or they override it in favor of logic, urgency, or desire, and in doing so they silence one of the most reliable forms of guidance they will ever receive. That uneasy feeling you sometimes experience is not random. It is not something to be dismissed simply because you cannot immediately explain it. It often arises before a decision that would lead you away from alignment. It appears before a choice that might look correct on the surface but carries hidden consequences beneath it. And yet, because it is subtle, people tend to ignore it. They say to themselves, "I'm just overthinking," and they proceed anyway. But notice something important. Every time you ignore that inner discomfort, life eventually confirms it. Not immediately, but in time. You begin to see that what felt slightly wrong in the beginning unfolds into complication later. What felt unsettled at the start becomes disturbance in experience. It is as if life was whispering to you in advance, but you were too focused on the outer world to hear it. This inner discomfort is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to pause you. It is a signal that says, "Look again. Something is not fully aligned here." And the more you ignore it, the louder life tends to speak through circumstances. What begins as a quiet inner hesitation can turn into external friction if it is consistently disregarded. There is also another side to this inner communication. When you are aligned, there is a natural sense of ease, not excitement that is based on imagination, but a calm clarity, a quiet knowing that does not need to be argued for. You may not have every detail figured out, but there is a steady sense of rightness within you. That is also guidance. That is alignment speaking in its own language. Most people are trained to trust external validation more than internal sensation. They ask others for confirmation. They look for signs in the outer world while ignoring the signals within themselves. But the outer world is often delayed. It reflects what has already been set in motion internally. By the time the external confirmation arrives, the inner signal has long been present. When you begin to honor that inner feeling, something profound shifts. You stop making decisions purely from pressure or fear. You begin to slow down before entering situations that feel off, even if they look attractive on the surface. You begin to recognize that not every opportunity is meant for you, even if it appears promising to others. This is not about becoming overly cautious or fearful of life. It is about developing sensitivity, a refined awareness that allows you to feel your way through decisions rather than forcing your way through them. Because force often comes from ignoring signals, while clarity comes from listening to them. And as you strengthen this inner listening, you begin to notice a pattern. The decisions that feel peaceful within you tend to unfold more smoothly in your experience. The decisions that feel heavy or conflicted tend to create resistance later. Life begins to confirm what your inner awareness already knew. So the discomfort is not your enemy, it is your early warning system. It is the quiet intelligence within you, refusing to let you walk blindly into misalignment. And when you finally learn to respect it, you no longer need life to correct you harshly, because you begin correcting your direction gently before the consequences appear. And in that awareness, you realize the deepest truth of all: peace has always been your compass. There is a peculiar challenge that every person faces at some point in life. It is the challenge of waiting, waiting for something to change, waiting for something to arrive, waiting for circumstances to finally align in a way that feels satisfying. And in that waiting, the mind begins to grow impatient. It starts to question the timing, to doubt the process, and to assume that because something has not happened yet, it may never happen at all. But you must understand something deeper about the nature of timing itself. What appears as delay is often not absence. It is preparation. It is alignment happening in dimensions you cannot yet see. Because while you are focused on the surface of your desire, life is working behind the surface to make sure that when it arrives in the right form, at the right time, and with the right foundation. Most people assume that timing should match their urgency. They believe that if they are ready now, everything else should also be ready now. But readiness is not only about desire, it is about capacity, it is about maturity. It is about the unseen arrangements that must come together before something can sustainably enter your life without breaking you or overwhelming you. When things take longer than expected, it is easy to interpret that delay as denial. You begin to think something is wrong with you, or wrong with the path, or wrong with the desire itself. But what if nothing is wrong? What if the delay is simply the space required for everything else to become right? There are connections being formed, lessons being completed, circumstances being rearranged, and sometimes even your own awareness being refined before what you desire can properly integrate into your life. Think of it like construction. Before a strong structure is built, the foundation must be prepared, and from the surface, foundation work does not look like progress. It looks like nothing is happening. It looks like waiting. But in reality, it is the most important phase of the entire process. Without it, everything that comes later would collapse. In the same way, your life is often in a foundation phase when you feel stuck. You are not being withheld from progress. You are being prepared for stability. And what feels like stagnation is actually unseen strengthening. The parts of you that must be ready for what you desire are being developed quietly, without announcement. There is also a deeper reason for delay. Sometimes what you want is not yet aligned with who you are becoming. And if it were to arrive too early, it would not fit your current state of being. So life, in its intelligence, does not simply give you what you ask for immediately. It synchronizes the inner and outer, so that when the two meet, there is harmony instead of conflict. This is why patience is not passive. True patience is trust in unseen progress. It is the ability to remain steady even when nothing appears to be moving, because you understand that movement is not always visible. Just because you cannot see the arrangement does not mean it is not happening. And if you look back at your own life, you will begin to notice something important. The things that arrive later often arrive better than you originally imagined. The timing that once frustrated you eventually revealed its wisdom. What you once thought was a delay was actually protection from misalignment or preparation for something greater. So when you find yourself waiting, do not interpret it as being forgotten. Interpret it as being formed. Something within you is being aligned with something without you. And that alignment requires time, not because life is slow, but because precision cannot be rushed. And in that understanding, waiting transforms from frustration into quiet trust, and trust becomes the strength that carries you forward. There is a truth that most people overlook, not because it is hidden, but because it requires responsibility. And that truth is this: recognizing the signs is not the completion of the process. It is only the beginning. Many people experience moments of clarity, moments where something inside them feels deeply true, where life seems to be pointing them in a certain direction, and yet they stop there. They observe it, they feel it, they even acknowledge it for a brief moment, and then they return to their old patterns without ever acting upon what they have seen. But understanding without action is incomplete awareness. It is like seeing a door open and choosing to stand still, waiting for the door to somehow pull you through. Life can show you direction, but it does not force movement. Movement is always your participation. It is your response to what you have recognized within yourself. Most people underestimate the importance of response. They believe awareness alone is enough, as if insight will automatically transform their experience. But insight is only a signal. It is an invitation, and every invitation requires acceptance if it is to become reality. Without response, even the clearest sign remains unused potential. You may notice how life gives you moments where everything becomes obvious for a brief period. You see the pattern, you feel the guidance, you understand what needs to change. In that moment, everything feels aligned. But then hesitation enters, doubt enters, habit enters, and slowly the clarity fades, not because it was false, but because it was not acted upon. Action is what anchors awareness into experience. Without action, realization remains suspended in thought. It never enters your lived reality. And over time, unacted awareness becomes frustration, because you begin to sense that you have understood many things but changed very little. There is a reason for this. Life does not only reveal direction to be observed, it reveals direction to be lived. And when you do not move with what you have been shown, you remain in the same cycle, not because you lack understanding, but because you have not embodied it. Taking action does not always mean making a large external change. Sometimes it begins with a simple internal shift, a decision to stop repeating what you already know is not serving you. a willingness to step away from what feels misaligned, a quiet but firm choice to trust what you have recognized instead of what fear is trying to maintain. But this is where most people hesitate, because action requires letting go of familiarity. And even when familiarity is uncomfortable, it is still known. The unknown, even if it is better, can feel uncertain. So people remain where they are, hoping that clarity alone will eventually change their situation. But clarity without movement becomes stagnation. When you respond to what you have seen, something powerful happens. Life begins to rearrange itself around your decision. New experiences emerge, new paths open, and what once felt like confusion begins to organize itself into direction. But that response must come from you first. Life reacts to your participation, not your observation. There is also something deeply empowering in action. It breaks the illusion that you are waiting for life to change you. Instead, you begin to realize that life moves with your engagement. Every step you take based on inner recognition becomes a confirmation of your awareness. And with each confirmation, your trust in your own perception strengthens. And once you begin to act on what you see, you no longer remain a passive observer of signs. You become someone who collaborates with them. You begin to move with life instead of waiting for it. And in that movement, hesitation dissolves, because clarity is no longer something you only recognize, but something you live. And in that living response, awareness finally becomes transformation,